Welcome to the Guerrilla Film Guide Podcast Roundtable Edition. This episode was recorded during the One Story, One Community celebration presented by Borland River Media and the Utah Film Center, and is titled, I Don't Know, Make It Look Pretty, Lighting a Scene with Intent. The panel was moderated by Laird Roberts, with guests Justus Page, Challis, and Oscar Jimenez. We hope you enjoy.
Angela, let's start with you. I've watched your pieces, very interesting pieces of artwork there. So who are you? How did you get started in this craziness?
Hello, thank you for having me here. What an honor. Well, I'm Angela. How did I get started in this? I'm a dance teacher. I've been a dance teacher forever, and then I did dance films. And starting to do dance films, I decided to go to film school so I know what I'm doing. So I went to the community college, and I did film school there, and then I went to grad school at the University of Utah, and that's when I decided I love cinematography. I just love the lighting and the camera. I'm just in love with it. And I was very lucky to be the cinematographer for Chasing the Dragon with directed by Eduardo Suarez, and Mortal Coil, directed by Connor Long. So that's my story, really short.
Okay, we'll get back to Chasing the Dragon and the lighting issue on that. I'm associated a little bit with Utah Film and Dance Festival, which I get to see a lot of these international dance films, and it's really a beautiful area to look at and explore. So your start in that, your combination of dance and film, that's a great thing to be doing. Okay, Justus, and I kind of know Justus a wee bit. Justus is just really one of those people who constantly amazes me and surprises me. He's one of the better upcoming directors of photography in Utah, where we're at. And he's leaving us, which is like, come on, Justus. Okay, Justus, go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, I'm a director of photography here. My journey started, I think it was 6 years ago. I had never really realized I wanted to be a cinematographer. It took me a long time. I've been making movies since I was 14. And it wasn't until I was about 21, which I think was about the time we met, that I started actually looking at cinematography as a long-term thing, as something that I could focus in on and do, because I fell in love with it. But prior to that, I'd actually been shooting movies for about 3 years as a cinematographer before I realized I actually wanted to be a cinematographer. It's just something that kept happening to me, and I never really gave it much thought. But yeah, I really fell in love with the craft, and I try to commit myself pretty heavily to it. I'd like to think maybe there's something for me that I can discover in myself as I do this craft, but it's been a fun 6 years.
Are you continuing with cinematography and with your movie?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. No, that's the goal is to continue to do it in perpetuity. And the past couple of years I picked up gaffing a lot more too, which I noticed has helped me dramatically improve my own cinematography. Just because for all the reasons you mentioned at the beginning, and how amazing light is, and how hard it is to quantify and truly ever have a very firm grasp of. But this is it. Long haul for me. I'm going to be doing this forever.
Very cool. Okay, Oscar.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So with cinematography, again, it's one of those accidental things that I just picked up. I was going to school at BYU, and I took an elective course, just when I needed to kind of commit to a major before I got stuck to what I was doing, and I needed an easy class, and so I took the 102 class, which is just introduction to film, and Yeah, I mean, the rest is history. I liked all aspects of film. Since BYU is mostly theory, I thought I would pursue kind of like the professor route, go and get my master's and a doctorate. And I just really love film theory. I think it's something just really beautiful about kind of making your own interpretations of film. And then I just kind of dabbled in photography, and I was like, this is kind of fun. I wasn't very good. I wasn't good at all. But I just wanted to know what shallow depth of field. I kept seeing these pictures when the Canon 5D was extremely popular. And I was like, well, how are they getting like these really quote unquote like cinematic pictures? And so I did my research, learned expose with triangle, and then yeah, and I guess the more I kind of got familiar with it, the more I fell in love. And then I dabbled in lighting, and then I took a year off from school and kind of worked as a camera PA for some of my friends who were starting their agencies, I guess. And I learned more from there, just kind of observing and asking questions and just doing whatever I could to get my hands on, be on set. And then I went back to school, applied for the film program, and I just realized I didn't really need to know as much as I thought I needed to know to go into film school, because that's the whole purpose of going to film school. You're learning. And so, but I thought that everybody that was going to film school, they knew they wanted to be filmmakers since the age of 2. And so that's why I was like, I need to get my leg up on, not a leg up, but just a catch up. And but that year off really helped me to. I watched a lot of like international films that I felt like that were important. And so my grasp of film knowledge and different directors and just a wide variety of cinema that really helped me to have a good launching pad into school. And during those 4 years, I really took advantage of school, and I was able to film a lot of short films. I met a professor in the photography department. His name is Robert Machoin, and then I kind of begged him just to help me, or just to let me help him as whatever he needed on set, because he's also a filmmaker, and eventually trusted me to shoot one of his films the summer before I graduated. It ended up going into Sundance, and that later that year we filmed a feature film, which also got into Sundance this past year, and then so it was a snowball effect, and then I won for the last year of my last capstone that I did at school. I won the ASU award for the Student Heritage Award, and that from there it was just one thing after another, and I was like, oh crap, I guess I'm okay at this. I'm okay, and so that's given me confidence to kind of really call myself a director of photography. And I don't know, it's been nice. It was also really overwhelming. I know a lot of people say, you're so lucky, and I'm just like, I don't think it's luck. It really is just a lot of pressure on me now, just to kind of success after success. It's really nice. I'm not gonna lie. It's really nice to get recognition, but once the COVID hit, it was bittersweet, because it took me time to kind of slow down a little bit and just really take this all in. And so I'm able to kind of re-energize my mind, and I guess a little bit of my mental health, and to now I'm ready to just go out there again, blazing, and hopefully to just re-energize and kind of come in with like a new purpose in mind.
So let's start talking about how you go about creating light for within, the word is intent. And intent, what does that mean? I mean, that means you want to do something with it. I've always worked in commercial, and I have rarely made my own material. It's always been a business. My first jobs were that way. And, I've worked on big shows that, multi-million-dollar, $20 million, $30 million productions, and then even commercials in the $5 million range. And so there's a high expectancy of what you do. And one of the things about film business is the higher you go in it, the more money that's spent, the more guarantee they expect. And so there's very much this regimented position descriptions. A DP does this, a director does this, a gaffer does this. And lighting is this kind of cooperative thing between a director who has an intent, who has a vision of what they want. And they work with a director of photography that initiates that intent. But it's also the director of photography working with a gaffer and a key grip also. And let's talk about that process and those relationships. And let's start with director of photography and how that works, because the standard is that the director comes on and tells the director of photography what to do. They set up, say, this is where the camera goes, and this is how it's going to move. I want this kind of mood to it. And let's talk about that a little bit. Angela, your thoughts on that? I mean, you're doing something that's kind of this new, exciting movement stuff that is just cool as heck. How do you think about lighting for that kind of an image?
Well, I think that one of the most important parts of being a DP is communicating with the director and know exactly what they want and know the script, know what this project is for, know your audience. I think that we need to get so involved with what this is and what we want to accomplish. Are we going to shoot a Seinfeld? Are we doing drama? Are you doing comedy? Do you want it dark? That feeling, we need to get in touch with what is the feeling for this project, then to accomplish that, you know, because it's very different for each one. And then we need to know the location. What does the location give us? Because I'm used to the small budget projects, you know, we don't have $1 million to rent whatever. Know the location, what is the location giving us, and then what do we need to bring? You know, and with the budget that we have, what can we bring and what do we do with it? And what I like about the working with the director is that the director says, I want the moon. And then we're like, okay. And then you go to your grip and your team, how do we give the moon? And then you do what you can with what you have. And so, but I think the key is to understand the project and know exactly what it is that we're shooting for, the vision that this project is going to.
It's really a communication business. You talking with you as a DP, you're talking both with the director and with your team, the gaffer and the key grip, really. It's exciting. You want a moon, you get a pole and you run it up, hit it with a light. Or nowadays it's done a little differently, but okay, Justus, I know you have some intense thinking about that relationship between a director and his director of photography.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like, and this may just be, you know, by nature of the experiences I've had, you know, I think directors sometimes need our assistance to kind of help articulate their own vision. You know, and I think it's rare that a director is able to come to me and be able to articulate everything that they want, everything they're trying to evoke, every theme point they're trying to hit, you know, all of those things. And part of our job is to kind of help bring that out and help articulate that in a visual way, you know? And so for me, a big part of this process is sitting down with the director and going over everything, you know, in the script, saying, okay, what does this mean? What are we trying to say? You know, like every scene, like whose perspective is this scene from? Like, what are we trying to learn? What are we trying to not show the audience? You know, and all of these things are like a big part of how we communicate visually to an audience what this story is, you know, which I think is a big part of the job. So for me, that's huge. And I really do take, you know, I don't, you know, I've never worked on a project with another cinematographer per se, so I never know what that process looks like for them. So maybe the way I do it is a little weird, I don't know, but I go very into the weeds with all that stuff and say, you know, exactly, you know, what kind of movement are we trying to say? What are we trying to know about this character? And that comes back into the lighting, you know, and a lot of that is, for me, one of the best clear-cut examples is Shane Hurlbut has this shot in The Greatest Game Ever Played where Shia LaBeouf has been told he has to like give up golfing. And he's looking out the window at the golf course, and, you know, and has this beautiful eye light, you know, the music's really there. There's like a slow pushing on him, and there's like hope, right? But he realizes he has to give it up. And so he like turns and looks back at the wall and looks down just a hair, and his eye light disappears, right? And the way that evokes like what's happened in here, what's happened to him emotionally, like in that moment, just with like the eye light disappearing, tells you everything you need to know about how he's defeated. You know, he has hope, he sees it out the window, but he knows it's not going to happen. Right. And to me, like, lighting has the power to do those kinds of things, enhance those things, bring out what we want to see, you know, and a lot of that is what we choose to focus on with light. You know, it's just a very base level. But for me, it really is all about intent, because that's how you know at the end that you communicated everything that you wanted to communicate to an audience about your story.
You know, Angela brought up that point about location, and I think that going to the location with that director and going through how that light's going to come, and you have to understand what time of day you're going to be shooting, because it's going to change, and then you have to know how long you're going to be shooting at that location, whether or not you're going to have to control the windows, because that light's going to change, and if you're not careful, you're going to have a continuity issue.
Yeah.
And so all of those, that, you know, communicating with the director on that location is just so very important, and seeing how you can utilize what's natural versus what you have to create.
Absolutely. I require it at this point. I mean, sometimes you can't help it because sometimes things change, right? Last minute changes have to happen. Locations will fall through. But I try to make it a standard that we do location scouts, right? And sometimes, you know, especially when you're starting out, you don't always get that consideration. You don't always know you can ask for it as a young DP even. But, you know, I feel like I'm at a point now where, you know, when I'm meeting with a director and we're planning out a project in the first place, I make it clear, like, we need to be able to have eyes on our location before we walk on there, because otherwise we're gonna run into some obstacles, and some of them may be overcomable, but some of them may not.
It's always problem solving.
Yes.
Oscar, your images and your fish piece,
The angler.
the one that I have nightmares about now.
Yeah.
The lighting on that was phenomenal.
No, thank you.
There's
Thank
some
you.
really dark, beautiful images there. They're disturbing, but they're at the same time, I think that was the intent. And so you're taking the medium and you have an intent. So were you the DP on that?
Correct, I was.
So the director had this, he must have had a nightmare, but you captured that vision pretty well in that. It had a tone to it that was fairly consistent. Can you talk about that a little bit, about that continuity of lighting throughout a project like that?
Yeah, sure. So what I like about the Neviker twins, Lucy and Max, they're as ambitious as I am. Sometimes we go over our heads, and but I think from the beginning, we did another short film before this where it was more of a learning experience for all of us how to work together. And then after that film, we were like, oh, we could have taken it further. And then we all agreed. And so with The Angler, that's what we decided to do. We were like, okay, what did we like from the first one that we can translate into this film? And what we really liked, so what their strategy is, they're trying to create a trilogy called part of the what they're calling it the Rocky Mountain trilogy, but with a lot of expressionistic cinematography. So and for me, I love, again, this is going back to kind of like film school, and I was able to watch a lot of these films from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s where experimental with light was a lot of that was the norm, right? With German expressionism. And so we took those philosophies in lighting and adapted it to this, and also try to make it theatrical as well. There's a big theatrical part of this this film. And I guess, again, going to film theory, like the power of a close-up, juxtaposed with a wide, going back and forth into those, that tells the audience, like, okay, this is your setting. Okay, now pay attention to this. So when it comes to short film, I think the short film is a genre within itself. The mistakes I've seen, and I've made these too, is that people try to make a short film kind of into a small feature, and they're putting too much where the audience starts getting lost. And even like its own film crew is they don't know, they just have too much, and the editing process kind of goes to hell a little bit. And so we just wanted to keep it simple with simple rules: expressionistic lighting, close-ups, wides, and theatrics. And so that's what we did. And from there was a couple of things that we did, kind of did on the fly too. I know we had for example, like in the exterior scene, when our angler goes into the woods, I was trying to figure out how to get more exposure into the trees, because I did want it to be moody, but at the same time, it's like, I can't, there's nothing special about the shot when it's just dark in the foreground and in the background where there's the information doesn't really matter. We need something in the foreground. And so I was like, I have this Leco that we can turn on, and the blades were all opened out, and there was a circle, and we're like, this looks actually pretty interesting. Doesn't make sense, but this goes, well, this is going with a theatric feeling. So we just embraced it. And then from there, I think that was day one. So we were able to kind of take that approach, because we can kind of keep doing it for the rest of the shoot. And then, yeah, I don't know. Again, there's something that I really love about Godard that he says when talking about from his key people, cinematographers, production designers, about the director, saying that the director should always be interrogated, and the director should always interrogate the script, constantly interrogating. It's like kind of like what Justus was saying. Why are we doing this? And so I do take that approach, and I'm very upfront from the beginning. It's like, I'm going to ask you questions. I hope I don't come off arrogant or obnoxious. It's because I care. It's because I care about what we're doing. And when I read a script, if I don't connect with it, I can't work on the project, because otherwise I'm just going to be a technician. I'm just going to be there going through the motions. I'm not going to be involved 100%, and it's going to be a waste of my time in the end, and a waste of, I don't know, I feel it would be a waste of everybody's time, because filmmaking takes a lot of work. It's not just principal photography. You're doing pre-production, and then you're doing post-production, and so it's an investment. It's not just a 3-day shoot. It's almost like a 2-month commitment. Most of the time non-paid. So it's anyway. So I need to connect with the script, and from there I'm able to make my own notes. What the lines or what scenes mean to me, and then I ask questions. If my notes connect with, if my notes are in line with what the directors say in their own initial pitch to me, or our first kind of initial session of talking, then perfect. We're on the same page. If we have different visions, then this is my opportunity to kind of suggest things. But I don't know. It's just collaboration, interrogation over and over and over again. So that way, principal photography goes smoothly, and then you're able to make those improvisations on set, and it doesn't feel like we don't know what we're doing.
So one of the things that has been really interesting to me in the last 10 or 15 years is that the director of photography used to have control over the image much more than they do now, and things are kind of moving away in a lot of areas from the DP into the colorist, and the DPs can work with the colorist. As our medium changes technically, that's going to change that kind of relationship. And really a director of photography comes in and now they have to understand how the camera works and things like the Bayer system and dynamic range, because those cameras are changing, and then color science. And so, Angela, can you talk about how you're actually utilizing those changes to make your work better in your lighting?
Well, we do know that a lot of it's going to be in post-production, but you need to give the raw material that is usable. You know, you need to expose. Now that there's this new program that they can change the focus. And like, okay, the first IC job is, oh, it's gone.
Yeah.
But you need to give the base for it to be workable and usable. You know, so the best you light, I think you just light and shoot as if nothing is going to be changed. And then when they go and they can enhance it, they can use that. But I don't like the idea, oh, we'll fix it in post. No, don't rely on that. Give them the best material you can, and then in post, they just kick it up another notch.
I'm trying to think. I'm terrible with names. Oh, brother, where art thou? The DP on that.
Roger Deakins.
Deakins dolly grip is a good friend of mine, and I asked him about that because it has a very unique tone to it. And it was the first time that it was shot normally, but it was changed in post. That antique look that they achieved, and Deakins did a lot of experimentation on it, and he concluded that digital was the way to go. And so he was kind of turning over a little bit of his control into giving it to the colorist. And the director, of course, determines that. But they had a working relationship good enough that Deakins was included in that colorist decisions. So that's kind of where it is. And what you're saying, Angela, is spot on, is that the best thing you can do is to give them an image that they can work with and give them as much latitude and as much of a blank canvas in a way that they can take it and shape. And that's exciting if you understand that downstream it's going to be different, but you have to understand what's going to happen downstream. Justus, talk about that.
Yeah, I think I'm a child of the digital age. I'm not old enough to have started in this at a time where things were on film. So for me, like the DSLR revolution was when I came to this existence. So for me, I feel like it's all I've ever really known, but I do agree. I think that the intensity of that, the things that you now have to know as a cinematographer, seem to have evolved for sure. And and that requires us to be constantly, because we can't be stuck in 5-10 years ago, or in 5-10 years from now, the industry will outrun us and there won't really be a place for us. Even if we're great image makers, just by nature of how things change, the new roles that come in and the way we have to work with people and the way we have to be mindful of how we deliver things, And so for me, I've always been really fascinated with that side of things, the technology side of things, because I think knowing the technology just enables you to have more tools in your belt, right? And so, I do a lot of color tests as well in the films I shoot. I will go and create and generate LUTs that we can use for reference on set, and we'll kind of use those kinds of things as our guiding light. So the director can stand there at the monitor next to me and we can be looking at a shot and he can go, so this is pretty close to how it's going to look then when we take it into post. I'm like, yes. What we're seeing here is what you should be getting when you walk into the editing room, if I'm not a total imbecile. So yeah, I mean, that whole process, I think, allows a director to be comfortable knowing, like, all right, what I'm seeing here is what I'm going to get, I think sometimes the hard part initially when this process began and we started working in log, and being able to have that kind of reference on set, it was hard for directors to have an idea of what it truly looked like, right? Because we were looking at it in a log sphere. It was very gray, flat scale. But now we kind of have the technology to say, okay, here's what we're testing for. This is what we're trying to evoke. These are the kind of colors we're trying to use, and we can monitor and create those on set and know that we're getting that thing. We're capturing the detail in the right places as well, right? Because we talk about things like, color wavelength, and the visible spectrum, and certain lights don't carry certain spectrums very well or not at all. And knowing, all right, in this scene we're trying to use a lot of maybe oranges. Or vice versa, you may be in an interesting scenario where you're trying to pull out like magentas and stuff, and you have to know that the equipment you're working with, how you're setting it up in camera, but also how you're doing it with the lights, means that the sensor will be able to process that wavelength of color because the lights you're using have that in its spectrum as well. So yeah, I mean, it's full technology all the way around, and as I said, I think just understanding those things for us allows us to be more useful to our directors. And that follows through to post, right? Because I've done a lot more studying into color correction, color grading, and I try to be more involved in that process as of the last year or two, just because I think it is crazy that, before there was sort of this idea we would just hand it off and it would disappear, and then we would just see it like everybody else for the first time at the screening, and then at that moment we'd have to go, that's not what we were trying to do. That came out a little bit different when it went into the color timing. So I like that because if we're just authoring the agency on set and then we're just hoping that last third of production, the post-production part, that integrity is maintained, right? We're leaving a lot of chance. So I don't like leaving that much to chance when it could mean the director doesn't get what he was looking to get when we started.
When you put a LUT on, it changes how that scene is going to be lit.
Yeah.
And it changes a lot of things downstream. Mm-hmm. It's just the DP job is becoming this, basically you're operating a computer with a lens and understanding LUTs and how you're going to show what you need to show on set is going to affect how your image is. You've got to understand every camera's dynamic range that you're using. How are you going to light unless you know what the range is, when you're going to lose detail in the whites and you're going to produce noise in the blacks? And testing, Oscar, do you test? How much testing you do before a production?
Oh, I love to. I try to be as prepared as possible. I think I sometimes go overboard and going with this color thing. I just so I can be a better cinematographer at school, I took a job at BYU Broadcasting as a colorist. So I worked there for about 2 years to just understand the basic principles of just of how much I can put camera and how much I can push color. And the nice thing about BYU Broadcasting, like all cameras are coming in. We have you have like they mostly worked with the Sony F5. Can you guys still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, they like Sony's there. What do you use? So you use a Sony then? Is that correct?
No. I use the Alexa for the most. I use the Alexa. For the angler we use the Amira. And so that's so yeah, I used a lot of the red at school, and then after school then I was able to get access to an Alexa, and so that's where I kind of I feel comfortable with both cameras, red and Alexa. Not so much the Sony. I feel like I'm out of practice, but I do know the post workflow pretty well, so I feel like I don't have qualms about it. And no, but yeah, I test all the time, even with like I bought a light meter at the beginning of school, and so that's been my kind of like just spotting and everything, and just kind of knowing like dynamic range, how much I can push as well, working with my little film camera and my DSLR all together, just so I can kind of get just as much information as possible. Again, I think I go overboard sometimes, but for me it's fine. I feel like for me it's all of that, it's fun, and so that's how I know I'm in the right job. It's I don't know. It sounds like if I explain this to anybody else, it's like this is too scientific, and it's like, no, this this is just work for me. I just love, and I love reading articles, and all this is fun.
Yeah, you've got to keep up on it because it changes so frequently. And you know, the difference between a RAD and the ARRIs are phenomenal. You've got to understand what that camera is doing. Angela, talk about the emotion that is going to be that you're trying to evoke with the use of colors and light levels.
What do you mean?
Well, you know, when you're shooting a scene, your color palette and usually the director is going to dictate that, but as a DP, you're going to want to deliver some consistency with that color palette that's going to make them happy. But you have to also understand, you know, what kind of effect a red color is going to have on the emotions of the scene. So talk about that when you're doing a production. And some of that gets into the DP often works with the set designer in creating it, because the designer may not know how the camera interprets a color that they put on. And how does that, you know, and then the amount of light that falls on that color, everything has an effect on it. What are your when you're looking at designing a scene and you're working with all these people and the directors ask you to do this, what is your thought process in working with that color palette and working with the way your camera interprets color?
Mm-hmm. What I like is, well, pre-production, you're planning all that, and then when you're doing it, just turn on the camera, see how it looks in the camera. Because sometimes for us, it just looks wonderful. Then you put the camera and it's just like, oh, this is not working. And you reminded me of this project that we work on, and the art department, oh my gosh, I think they would set everything up, then Angela came and changed everything. And that was frustrating for them, because it is, you do, sometimes in some projects, the director and the DP are working so close together, and the art department is not in those conversations. So they need to be there, so we can all be in the same mindset and then go for it. Because then that happens, that the Angela shows up and they just like, no, take this off, too much, you know. So that to happen a lot.
You know, the lower the budget, almost the more that you have to plan and get things done, because you don't have time for changes like that very often. And so having them on set, on the scout and the locations is important. And so you've got to have a relationship with that set designer and the dressers. Do you do color tests on sets?
Yeah, and also I was thinking that we need to also work with the wardrobe person.
Oh yeah.
In the same conversations, and then you know, they're going to be dressed this way, and these are going to be the decorations and all that. And I actually like to take a lot of pictures before, like as we're practicing, so then we are in the same conversation. Yeah,
that's an important aspect. And then the kind of lights that you're going to use are going to affect how that wardrobe is going to be interpreted by the camera. And Justus, you talked a little bit about how, and lights, which gets us into that issue of lights, and lights are changing rapidly, and at the same time they're not. So talk about how you're thinking about lighting when, you know, we're talking about hive lights and, you know, the CRI index and all these crazy things about lights, that they all have a different kind of look to them.
Yeah, and it's it's one of the reasons you have to test, because you know, especially in lighting, the technology is changing so much. What the lighting can do, you know, and then we do talk about things like CRI, you know, how accurately it transmits color, and then, you know, again, as you talked about, certain things, certain LEDs don't possess certain wavelengths of color depending on the manufacturer and all this stuff. And so, you know, that testing is so big, that art department stuff is so big, because you got to know, again, I guess taking it all back to intent, you got to know what you're trying to achieve. And so on this film I shot earlier this year, there was a scene in this living room, and it's supposed to be very, very kind of moody, like orangish sunsetty, very like a medium amber kind of color throughout the space. But the actor and one of the main props in that scene is a very vibrant, like clear blue, like Oscar's shirt there. And with all of that orange, you have to know, like, the lights I'm using are still going to transmit into that wavelength of color, because it was a very prominent, very vibrant blue. And so we had to know, like, okay, going into this, like, is this going to work? Not only is this camera capturing, the blue pixel well enough at the exposure that we're trying to get, but are these lights capable of possessing that wavelength? And they were. We figured that out, and we made sure they were, and it looks fantastic. I think it turned out super vibrant. But those are the kinds of things you can't really leave to chance, as you said, because you could walk on and go, wow, that maroon under these lights actually just looks like a muddy, gross brown. Like it's not working. And sometimes our best source is the sun, because the sun doesn't ever really have an issue showing up those kinds of colors. But a lot of the environments we're working in, we don't really have that. So it's just all about knowing, and you'd have to do those tests. You have to be so familiar with the equipment, what's out there, and what you're familiar working with. What will an HMI do if I throw like a steel blue, like a Lee over it, or what'll happen to this Fresnel if I throw like a 255 and like a sodium in front of it as well. Like what's going to happen? What's it going to do to the color? What happens to the spectrum of color that now is being emitted into the scene? All of those things, and you just kind of have to be so aware of them, and be just so mindful, because again, otherwise what you're doing is you're walking in and going, well, this is what we rented. This is what we're trying to show. Hope they match, hope they work, hope these colors we're trying to show, hopefully what's here in the scene transmits well. And so, yeah, it's big. It's a big part of it. And especially I think as DPs, understanding not just the new cameras and the lenses and, the new technology that comes out in them with like dual ISO and high dynamic range and all of these things. It's also understanding what our lights do. And that's just a crazy world unto itself. It's equivalently as large and constantly evolving as cameras is. So it's quite fun trying to keep up with them both.
That dual focus thing that Angela mentioned, that's just you crazy talk now. Kind of an HDRX kind of thing for focus. Why don't you just get it right the first time?
Yeah, well, I think it's like, they talked about, and this has been a discussion because of The Mandalorian, right? Like, and I guess it's been going on for a while, I guess, because we've always been doing like green screen, blue screen stuff. But, like, I feel like there has to be a tangible difference in the organically captured versus the synthetically added. And there's something about what our eyes know to be real versus what we're trying to sell as real. And I feel like focus has got to be that same thing, because I've seen it before in a project and not noticed that it was, artificially adjusted for focus later. But, I feel like my eye understands focus better as a viewer than the technology probably can at this point properly articulate. So it is weird. And I'll be curious to see what those kinds of technologies do in 10, 15 years. If we'll hit a point where we're like, I can't tell the difference. Like, I couldn't tell you that this was all shot on an LED volume. I couldn't tell you that this was artificially focused in post. We may get to that point one day, but as it stands now, nothing truly does beat what we intentionally are trying to capture as professionals in our crafts when we're there on set.
Well, it's extremely hard on set to catch focus, and that first assistant camera job is about as hard as a job as there is in a motion picture.
It was a big wake-up call for me. I did a feature last summer where I was first AC, and it was the biggest project I've ever first AC. It was an out-of-state production that came in, and we were shooting in Moab, right? And we were super remote. We were like an hour from civilization, and we did the whole thing remotely, focus-wise, just because with all the kinds of movements, it wasn't as tenable to be on camera. But after like 3 weeks of running around the desert, having to like set up these monitors every time, having to calibrate the focus meter every time, and having to, do the playback. And I only had like a 7-inch screen. So I was like, all right, I'm pretty sure, I've set in how my peaking looks and everything. I'm pretty sure this is working. And then having to go back in dailies at the end of the day and make sure that everything was in focus. But I really, after I did that job, I was like, wow, I'm not a first AC, and kudos to all those people that are, because our ACs really save our asses, I think, more often than we ever give them credit for.
Yeah, it's an extremely difficult job.
Yes.
Oscar, the emotion that you caught in Angler was really interesting. And how do you, you've done testing. Talk about, again, a little bit of color palette, a little bit of dynamic range kind of things, of how that knowledge and how that colorist background that you did, the intent is to create an emotion with all those elements. Talk about what you're thinking about when you're doing that.
Yeah, so I guess, again, going to film theory and color theory, light pushes stuff foreground, darkness pushes stuff in the background. Same thing with color. Warm colors push things in the foreground, cool colors push things in the background. And then there's additive light and then subtractive light, and how those colors mix together. And so just, I guess, kind of having like a fundamental knowledge of that, then you're able to experiment. You're able to kind of go into a scene and say, okay, if I put these colors together, I potentially would have this. But there's always a caveat. There's always something bouncing from somewhere that you're like, oh crap, that was a mistake. We need to flag it off. And with the Angler, it's about a fish, right? It's about a man who essentially catches himself in the end. And so blue was a big, or I guess I would say cool colors in general were kind of like this big motif that we were trying to go with. And in order to kind of add more emphasis on those cool colors, we needed something warm. We needed some warmness in the scene to kind of juxtapose and give the audience kind of like this more intense feeling into it. And so that's how I kind of went into it. There really wasn't anything more than that, other than just keeping in mind, like, okay, I have to keep this thing. So, and constantly watching through the eyepiece and saying, okay, am I seeing everything that I want to? And then the colorist that I work with, his name is Justus Page. He actually trained me for like a couple of days when I worked there before he had to go, because he was graduating, so he had to find another job. And so I kind of went out to him on the limb, like, hey, would you be interested in helping us out? And then ever since then, we've been working together. So it's been pretty nice. And so kind of already having that established relationship that I know that he knows how to look at color the same way that I do. And how to manipulate those exposures if we need a little bit more or less. I don't know, it just it creates confidence for me. I'm not sure if I answered your question, actually.
Pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like there really was no like technical wise, there really wasn't any more than kind of knowing my fundamentals in color theory. Everything comes, again, going back to the script. What do we need the audience to feel? What are the philosophies, or kind of like the what are we trying to tell through the images? And as long as I'm feeling that, I feel like I have a pretty good sense of judgment, that I'm pretty confident that the audience will feel that. I also have to trust the audience that they're smart enough to figure it out. I don't want to spoon feed everything to them as well.
You create a color palette.
Correct.
Angela, in a lot, one of the pieces I saw of yours was a little bit abstract, and it was a dance movement thing. And one of the things, the Russian cinematographer, Eisenstein, is that him, or am I thinking of the photographer? Anyway, he talks about using graphics to create tension. And I thought you were really doing a good job of doing that with some of your images. You're creating this emotion out of lights and shadows and darkness and movement. And while we could tell it was a dancer, yes, but a lot of it came out of the emotion of the lines that we're seeing, and that juxtaposition of things. How much thinking did you look at that with intent to do that?
Yes, everything was very planned. And the background is one thing, then we separated the background from the dancer, and then the words, where they go on the screen, what kind of writing we're using on the screen, what kind of colors do we have. Everything was with the intent. You are creating anger, we are creating depression, you are creating those there's three emotions that were going, and that one was denial, and everything was planned to the T, you know. And then when you bring it to the computer and all that, and then other things happen and then come to life. But yes, the background, the foreground, the wardrobe, everything makes it, you know, it's a mise en scène. Whatever you're going to put in there has to be part of this. If not, take it out. That's
it. That's an important point to make. If it doesn't contribute, take it out. Yeah. Chiaroscuro is one of the big important concepts of lighting and in telling a story with lighting. You want to talk about chiaroscuro and how you use it a little bit, Angela?
Oh, I just love it. You know, I don't like to light scenes that everything is seen. You know, I just love to use the darkness. I think darkness is as important as the light, you know?
I like that. The darkness is as important as the light. It really is. And within the range of the camera, what camera do you use, and how do you think in terms of dynamic range and that
well,
sort
I've
of
been using the red a lot, all those reds, fancy reds, and I love them. They have a huge range, and they do really nice at capturing the darkness that I'm talking about. Yeah.
Darkness is hard, isn't it? Because it tends to go noisy if you don't do it right. Justus, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're dealing with? Of course, I love what Angela says, that the darkness is important to the light, and chiaroscuro is just that. It says darkness and light, chiaroscura. Talk about that. Noise. And when you're lighting, are you thinking about noise levels and how those shadows are going to interpret? Now, you've done testing, and so you know where your thresholds are.
Yeah. And I think another part of that is just, you know, understanding kind of an ambient level we're trying to achieve. You know, and then we have discussions about, you know, what we want out of the shadows too, because sometimes it's, you know, referencing back to a film like Arrival, sometimes you want your blacks to be a little lifted. You know, you want them to kind of float maybe around the 5 to 10 IRE range. And sometimes you want them to be very clean and pristine and, you know, crisp, like very filmic kind of blacks, like you were shooting on 35. And so there's an artistic intent behind how you do those too. But, you know, again, it all comes back to, you know, with technology now, we have to be mindful of like, all right, when a sensor starts reaching a certain temperature, heat starts actually generating noise in our shadows and in certain ranges, and knowing, okay, cool. So you have to be mindful of, you know, the temperature of the camera as well when we do this, as well as, you know, our ISO, obviously, and all of these things. And yeah, it all really comes back to like, I'm saying, okay, cool. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're looking at a scene. We really like that there are heavy shadows, right? We're looking at the scene and we're going, all right, in this scene specifically, what we're trying to convey, this contrast works, this very key heavy, you know, low on fill, like 5:1, 6:1 contrast ratios, you know, how it's working in this scene for what we're trying to convey. And it's fun to see it like happen. It's fun to like light a scene and go, it's a little too much over there, actually. We have just a little bit too much ambient fill. You know, we'll do like a meter reading and we'll go, can we bring that down? Like, we need like a half stop. And I think it's coming just a little too much off the ceiling and creating like on that fill side there. I probably still have about 10 IRE to play with there while I have a comfortable amount of detail. And saying, okay, cool. Well, let's creep a flag, you know, over the top of our unit here. Just keep walking it, and then we'll look at the histogram, we'll look at the image, we'll look at the false color as we walk it, and we'll go there. That's the spot. That's the levels we're looking for. That's where the money is. And it's fun. It's fun to see it, looking at the image and go, okay, cool. These shadows are perfect. The right amount of detail that we want is here. You know, the colors that we want in the shadows, or lack thereof. Again, because sometimes you just want clean, pristine blacks, just beautiful, clear as they are. And sometimes you're trying to introduce a little color into those. So you're going, all right, cool, that's great. We're getting just a hint of that like Moroccan pink right there into those shadows. And that's perfect, you know? It's just a lot of fun to play with. And, you know, light and shadow, truly, your light matters so little without the shadow. And it's that shadow that creates that dimension and that texture in your image, right? It creates that separation. It creates that focus, you know, because a big part of our job is, you know, as the headline of this thing is, you know, I don't know, make it look pretty, you know, the worst phrase in the whole world. Our job is to be so much more than that. And our job is to like guide the viewer's eye, you know, and when we set up an image, the audience should so comfortably look at that image right away and their eye goes exactly where it's supposed to. And a huge part of that, beyond actual literal focus itself, is in the lighting, how we light it, where we put the subject in the light so that it's so clear, just our eyes naturally go to that place. And you can't have that without having the lights and darks. So I think they're a lot of fun to play around with, absolutely.
I talked to a guy just last night. A friend of mine premiered her film that she did, and her brother teaches cinematography in New York, and he was comparing it to the things that a magician does, that it's all about direction and getting people to look in a particular place on the image, on the frame. And I thought that was an interesting comparison. You know, the magician gets you to look over here while he's doing something here to distract you from it so he can pull his little trick off. And it's
visual tension, you know, a big part of what we do, depending on, you know, the kind of story we're trying to tell, is creating that visual tension. And a lot of that can be done, as you said, with the light. Like I shot a film last year where there's a scene where we have a guy creeping around in the background that's kind of trying to sneak up on this guy. And, you know, and we made it so we can see him, you know. He's dark. The detail is there. We can see that he's there, but it's so clearly meant to be focused on the guy that's being snuck up upon. And I think the way that, you know, we compose it and clearly the way we light it was meant to create this visual tension of like, you know, clearly we see him because he's bathed in light and we can't see that guy very well. And so clearly this guy can't see that guy very well either. And there's that suspense created, that tension of space, of light, and all those things. And you're generating, you know, the tone, you're generating the focus. And I think so when we talk about those things like the philosophies and you know, putting the intent in there, sometimes it's less the articulatable thing and more the emotional thing that we're trying to distill in people, right? Because even if an audience member, like an average audience member, can walk out of your movie and they can't specifically say why it was tense for them or why it really touched them or why it made them laugh, you know, that's how we know I did our job, is that what we did, what we set up, the way we would compose, the way we would light would generate those kinds of emotions and tensions and feelings in the sense of space that they weren't even realizing were happening to them when they were watching the film, just because the visuals did their job and we did our jobs as cinematographers.
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things is within I'm also a writer. I've sold 14 screenplays, and one of the things that we do with writing is it's like looking at a clock. You can see the hands moving and you can tell time with it, but you have no idea what's going on behind that there are gears working on that, and that you're creating things that create emotions with intent to create emotions within your story that should be invisible to people who are watching it. They should respond to it. Why is it so important for a DP to understand the craft of storytelling and the art of storytelling? Oscar, go ahead, run with it.
Hold on, Laird. I'll have to tell you. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I've been reminded by Michael that I think we actually are about to hit our time in about 1
minute. Are we? Oh, we're 1:45. So
it's really bums me out because the question you just asked, Oscar, is an amazing question. I think we'd all love to have a crack at answering. But yeah, I think our time is basically up here.
Oh no, too much. Thank you, guys. I'm just very impressed with all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the future. This is going to be so very cool.
Amazing group of people.
I have a project that I wanted to do with Justus, but he's moving away, so I can't.
It's not too late. It's not too late. I'll be back. I'll be here. I have family here.
Okay.
Let's make it happen.
And it's a guy who wears a uniform too.
Right up my alley.
All right.
Are we supposed to wrap now?
I think so.
Okay, we're wrapped. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Say bye.
See ya.